Hello, everyone. Welcome. Hi, I'm Rodney Gibbs with the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. Thank you for joining us for this discussion with our political team today. If you're here, you probably enjoy politics as much as we do, so we're excited that you're kind of coming into our virtual newsroom to talk about this with us. A couple of housekeeping things first, and then I will get out of the way. First, thank you very much for subscribing to the AJC, supporting our work. We couldn't do things like this without you. This is only possible because of your support. We also want to extend a special thank you and welcome today to the Swing State, Georgia subscribers. Swing State is a new newsletter we've started that is tailored for people outside of Georgia, but who are interested in Georgia politics and voting and all the election laws and things that are happening here. So if you're from DC or Virginia or Chicago, New York, wherever you are, welcome to Georgia. Hope you enjoy the event. These events we do like this, we hope they kind of bring you inside the newsroom, let you meet the reporters that you're reading their work every day and get to know them. A couple housekeeping things, then we'll get on with the stuff you're really here for. You're not here for me. This will be a 30-minute conversation with our reporters. We will take your questions later in the half hour, so start adding those to chat, and we will get to those later in the program. And I think that's it for housekeeping. We're glad you're here. So let me introduce Patricia Murphy. Hopefully you know Patricia from the AJC, from television, from all sorts of stuff. Thank you, Patricia, for being here, and I'll hand it off to you.
Great. Thank you so much, Rodney. And thank you so much to our subscribers, not just for subscribing to the AJC and Swing State, but also thank you so much for tuning in today. Thank you for sharing part of your lunch hour with us. So I'm Patricia Murphy. I am the AJC's political columnist. I also work on the Jolt Morning Newsletter and Swing State with my colleagues. And I am excited to also introduce them to you today. I'm joined today also by Greg Bluestein, who is the AJC's senior politics reporter. Also joining us today is Tia Mitchell, who is the AJC's Washington correspondent. And Greg and Tia, I'm sure y'all have seen them both on national television, local television. They both are at the top of their beats. They really own their beats. And I think we're going to learn a lot from them today about what they're seeing in these incredible Georgia races and also what Tia's covering up on Capitol Hill. So Greg and Tia, thanks for being with us today.
It's great to be here. Looking forward to a wonderful discussion.
Okay, great. Well, Greg, I'm going to start with you. You are taking the lead on the governor's race. We have another incredible election here in Georgia. It almost feels like 2020 did not end, and then 2022 was very quickly upon us. But give us the contours of the governor's race, how the candidates are doing, and generally what you're seeing when you're out there on the trail with these two candidates.
Well, Patricia, first, I realized I was on mute earlier. Sorry about that. But you gave us nice props, but we should give you nice props as well as our lead political columnist and the lead anchor on the Morning Jolt every morning. And of course, my partner on Politically Georgia, the podcast. You said that 2022 didn't feel like it has ever ended. Well, 2018 in a sense hasn't ended because we're still rehashing some of the same arguments that we saw in the 2018 governor's race between Stacey Abrams and Brian Kemp. Back then, Stacey Abrams was a known quantity to many in Georgia, but was new on the national political scene. Now she is well-known. She's one of the elite fundraisers, not just in Georgia, but around the nation, along with Senator Warnock. They've raised tens of millions of dollars. They have amassed far more resources than their Republican opponents, even more than incumbent Governor Brian Kemp. Yet the polls show and the campaigns confirm with their own internal data that Governor Kemp has a small but solid lead. We're talking 3, 4, 5 points in every poll that we've seen, including the Atlanta Journal-Constitution poll. So Stacey Abrams right now is running as an underdog. She opened this campaign with a message about expanding Medicaid, about more funding for education, more funding for the Hope Scholarship. She's since expanded her message to new ways that she did not embrace in 2018. And the biggest might be her push to legalize casino gambling and sports betting in order to fund a needs-based higher education scholarship. So she's hoping that this will be a real difference, a real policy divide between the two. And of course, with the Roe v. Wade ruling being overturned earlier this year and with Georgia's anti-abortion law taking effect, she hopes that her stances preserving abortion rights and against gun expansions will pay dividends for her. But right now, Governor Kemp is focusing on the economy. And he's using, as we wrote this morning, he's using money from the federal America Rescue Plan that all Republicans, including him, all congressional Republicans and many state Republicans, including the governor, opposed. He's using that right now to sort of bolster his case, saying, hey, now I'm giving back billions of dollars in tax refunds, and in this case, giving back about $1.2 billion in checks to needy Georgia voters. Oh, Patricia, you're on mute now too. Patricia, you're on mute.
Thank you. It was not letting me unmute myself. I knew I was on mute. I'm so sorry. My dog was barking, as all Zoom meetings deteriorate quickly. This is no exception. Listen, I also really want to plug your book, Greg, because I'm sure you weren't going to. Greg has actually written the book about the 2018 and 2020 elections. It's called Flipped. And for anybody who wants to get into the real nitty gritty of how those two races have really brought us to where we are today, I think Flipped is really like the best place for people to get started on that. But it's not just a governor's race that we have happening here in Georgia. Tia, you cover Senator Raphael Warnock, and you're also covering his race for re-election against Herschel Walker. This is just another incredible nationally watched marquee race. Tell us what you're seeing between those two candidates, how they're presenting themselves, and which issues seem to be making any difference in that race as well.
So let's frame this race. You know, we all know that when Warnock and Ossoff won in January 2020, they flipped, go back to Greg's book, they flipped the Senate and put it in Democrats' control. And now, because Ossoff got 6 years, Warnock got the short straw. And so he's back on the ballot. Now he's running for a full 6-year term. And once again, control of the Senate hangs in the balance. And that's why this race is so highly watched. It's very competitive because we know Georgia is a very competitive state. And, I don't know if Republicans in some ways, on paper, they couldn't have recruited a better opponent for Raphael Warnock. He's the first Black man to be elected to the Senate as a Democrat in the Deep South since Reconstruction. And so there's a big historic nature. You've got this pastor of Martin Luther King Jr.'s former pulpit. Who do you put up against that guy? Well, you find the biggest star to ever come out of Georgia, and who also happens to be a Black man with a compelling personal story. And we all know that's Herschel Walker. So on paper, they're evenly matched with very powerful stories and deep connections to Georgia. But we know that Herschel Walker also comes with a lot of baggage. His campaign initially, he wasn't really talking specifics on the issues. His resume and some of his business dealings and personal dealings have been quite controversial. That being said, the polls show that this race is still very close. It shows Warnock, a little bit ahead. Definitely shows Warnock doing better in his matchup than Stacey Abrams. But we expect this to be really competitive. As far as the issues, for the Republicans and Herschel Walker, what they're really trying to do is say Raphael Warnock is in lockstep with President Joe Biden. And they're hoping that because President Biden's approval ratings have been pretty low, even though he's had a couple of good weeks and that might help him out, he's had pretty low approval ratings. They're thinking if they tie Warnock to President Biden, which in many ways is true. Warnock is a supporter of the Biden agenda. He has spoken out and criticized some of Biden things, but he pretty much votes the way Biden wants him to vote. So that's kind of on the Republican side. They're thinking if we just tie him to Biden, maybe we can defeat him. But again, on the issues, we're talking about Medicaid expansion, abortion rights, gun control, Warnock's positions seem to be a little bit more populist than Herschel Walker. Herschel Walker's anti-abortion. He's for limits on gun control that sometimes don't poll well. You know, he hasn't been all in on things like healthcare and Medicaid expansion. But again, we don't have a whole lot of specifics from Walker, which brings me to my final point. Are they going to debate? Big question mark.
Yes, that is a huge question mark. And as soon as we know the answer, actually, we're pushing for an answer, but as soon as we know for an answer, our subscribers on this call will be the first to know, of course. But Tia, you're so right. In terms of Herschel Walker being a superstar, I was at an event with him last night. It was a Women for Herschel event, and there were 500 women at this event. The fire marshal had to close down attendance because there were so many people just flooding into this. I don't know who else could get 500 women on a Wednesday in August, this far out from Election Day. So it's really very evident and obvious when we're out on the trail with him that he just has this really kind of unbelievable following of people who he's beloved by a group of voters. The question is, can he get the rest of Georgians or even enough, a majority to vote for him to win that seat? But Greg, these two races are not happening in a vacuum. And I'd love for you to talk a little bit about the interplay between the governor's race and the Senate race. And we're seeing in some of our pollings, those are not lining up exactly the same way. What are you seeing between the governor's race and the Senate race, and who is kind of looking the best in those two between
it's really interesting, Patricia, because we are seeing a definite trend of split ticket voting. We're not sure if that trend will hold up because it's very rare, not just in Georgia, but around the country, to have a split ticket voting. Voters tend to support incumbents, so that would support both Kemp and Warnock. But at the same time, so many voters vote straight down the ticket. But Herschel Walker is a unique candidate, as we both said. He has a history of lies, of conspiracy theories, of falsehoods, of just confusing statements on the campaign trail, especially early on in this campaign. He's trying to refocus his message, as you probably heard last night, Patricia. I was with Senator Warnock in Middle Georgia. But when you were out in Kennesaw with Herschel Walker, you probably heard him talk about the economy, talk about Biden, try to tie this race back to try to make this race a referendum on Joe Biden, who in the AJC poll only had a approval rating of 36% among likely Georgia voters, so very, very low. But at the same time, we're seeing a number of Republicans, at least in our poll, 4% of Kemp supporters are backing Raphael Warnock. Another 4% are backing the Libertarian candidate. So there's clearly either a protest vote or a reluctant Republican vote that's headed towards Senator Warnock. And in a race and in a state that is the most politically divided state in the nation, where even small fluctuations, even small changes in voter habits can have a big differences, even that small number of voters fleeing from the Republican camp to Senator Warnock could be the difference that decides this November election.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And Tia, you had mentioned that control of the U.S. Senate is certainly going to be on the ballot down here in Georgia, but control of the House is really going to be up on the ballot nationally. And also, it looks like we have at least one race that is going to be important potentially to control of the U.S. House. Talk a little bit about the House races in Georgia, the U.S. House races that you're watching carefully as well.
Yes. So, the conventional wisdom is that when there's a new president in power and it's always been a his this far, but one day we'll be able to say his or her, in their first midterms, they usually lose seats, particularly in the House. And again, with Joe Biden's approval ratings being so low, the conventional wisdom is that Republicans are poised to take control of the House majority, which right now, part of the reason why Biden's been able to do so much is Democrats control, both the House, the Senate, and the White House. So Republicans really want to get that majority back to have a lot more power in Washington. There's one seat in Georgia that is attainable for flipping. Georgia and redistricting has made it so that there's really only one truly toss-up seat in the state out of our 14 congressional districts. And that's the 2nd district in Southwest Georgia, your Albany. It goes over to Thomasville now, parts of Macon, parts of Columbus. And it's a rural district. It is majority Black, but just a little bit over 50% Black. It is majority Democrat, but again, just over 50%. I think I'm getting the numbers right. It might be a little under 50% Black. Anyways, right now, well, so how do I say this? During the primary, kind of the same dynamics as the Senate race, where Sanford Bishop is the incumbent. He has been there forever, 30 years. He is what we used to call a blue dog, but he votes with Joe Biden and the Democrats. But, he's just someone who even Republicans at this point, high name ID, they're used to voting for him. But Republicans were hoping if they get the right candidate in and they ride this red wave of kind of discontent with President Biden in the White House, that the seat could be flippable because, again, it's just slightly majority Democrat. And so they recruited, they had a candidate named Chris West, who is from the district, born and raised, and but they also recruited a young man named Jeremy Hunt, who's from the Atlanta area, but he and his family moved down to the district. He had a lot of money and a lot of backing from establishment Republicans like Nikki Haley, Newt Gingrich, Josh Hawley, and he's Black. And again, we mentioned that this district is, has either a majority or a plurality of Black voters. So it came down in the runoff to Jeremy Hunt and Chris West, but Chris West won, again, mainly because his ties to the district, actually saying, I live here, I know you, won over than the new guy who really didn't have deep ties to this part of Georgia. And as a result, it no longer seems to be there have been some election prognosticators who have downgraded that race as not as competitive as they thought it once could have been. It looks like Sanford Bishop won't have as rough of a time getting reelected. But again, it's still a toss-up. Anything could happen. A lot will depend on the overall state of Democrats when we get into voting period.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. So I think we'll definitely know to keep an eye on that second congressional district as election night is happening. That's definitely one for people to watch. If that flips, it looks like that'll put Republicans in really good shape to be taking control of the House. Well, we had promised that we were going to take questions from our viewers and our audience. And so we're going to move to questions right now. We have them in chat. If anybody else in the audience still has more questions based on what you've heard so far, go ahead and put them in chat and we will take as many as we can before we try and get y'all out of here on time as well. The first question we're going to get to is from Leviha Bolster. And the question is, and Tia, I'm going to send this one to you. Is anybody in the statewide races talking about doing anything about affordable housing?
There we go. The reason why, so the hosts have us trapped. We got to be unmuted. We have to wait to be unmuted. Okay. Affordable housing is something, number one, if we can please share the recent AJC special investigation, Dangerous Dwellings, about the affordable housing issue. If you haven't read it, read it. It's something we should be talking about, particularly those who live in Metro Atlanta or other kind of urban areas around Georgia. That being said, you hear more about affordable housing from Democrats because they're more likely to represent these urban areas where, the rising cost of housing and affordable housing is a concern. I will say, so, and I'll be honest, affordable housing, when you talk about just in general, the elections and what issues are popping up most prominent, I wouldn't say affordable housing, but affordability overall, the economy, inflation is a big theme of this year's election. We're hearing a lot about it. I also just want to plug, if you're in the Augusta area, U.S. Rep. Rick Allen has become a big he's been talking a lot about affordable housing and again, the dangerous dwellings in the Augusta area, but again, not really a campaign issue.
Yeah, we have heard, I will say, Greg, talk a little bit about this. We heard Stacey Abrams bring up affordable
this has
housing.
become a significant issue for Stacey Abrams' campaign. Actually, kind of rebounding off of the ongoing AJC Dangerous Dwelling series of articles, because she announced not that long ago that she, under her plan, if she's elected, she would hold predatory landlords accountable for keeping families in unsafe living conditions as part of a broader plan to pump more money into affordable housing. Her plan would give local code inspectors more power to go after out-of-state hedge funds and Silicon Valley firms that have really been gobbling up the city's housing and apartment stocks and raising rents to these luxury price points that many Georgians cannot afford. So it's not an issue that we often hear about on the campaign trail. It's certainly not an issue that is in the mainstream. When candidates run, they're talking about broader issues, the economy, guns, taxes, those issues. But for Stacey Abrams, she feels like this is a pillar of her economic argument. We have not heard much from Governor Kemp at all. We've written about this, about his second term agenda. We've only really heard two major policies that he just unveiled last week. They do not involve affordable housing, but in general, this is going to be a major issue for Stacey Abrams should she win the governor's race in November.
Great. Thanks so much. And Greg, I'm going to stick with you for this next question because I know you know a lot about it. Jake Field wants to know any indication of who has the advantage in some of the statewide down ballot races. This is the first time in a long time that I can think of. We have lots and lots of also kind of equally fascinating and competitive down ballot races. So talk a little bit about those, especially we have a couple of questions about the LG's race and then that Secretary of State's race.
Yeah, we have some of the premier down ballot races in the nation, starting with the Secretary of State's race because of all the attention on Brad Raffensperger. And because a lot of people, including me, and maybe you too, Patricia, we thought he was in real deep trouble. I didn't even think he'd qualify to run, that he was so endangered because of his fight against, his stand against Trump when he rejected Trump's attempt to overturn the election and find the number of votes needed to beat Joe Biden here in Georgia. Instead, he's emerged victorious over Jody Heiss, and our polls show him with a double-digit lead over the Democrat Bean Wen in that race. The other down ticket races, the polls that the AJC and other outlets have had generally show the Republicans with a 3, 4, 5 point advantage. As goes the governor's race, generally so goes these down ticket ballot races. But the power of incumbency helps the Republicans who are incumbents, and the Democrats are looking for different wedge issues to gain more attention, to maybe pull over some more crossover votes. So in the AG's race, that means Jen Jordan's out there saying that if she were elected attorney general, she wouldn't use any state resources to defend the state's anti-abortion law. If Charlie Bailey's elected lieutenant governor, he's saying, look, my opponent was a fake GOP elector. He calls Burt Jones, the Republican state senator he's running against, unpatriotic and un-American. So that's just a glimpse of the kind of rhetoric we're hearing from some of the down ticket candidates. And I shouldn't leave out Bean Wen, who says that Brad Raffensperger is not our friend, even though he has got national acclaim for standing up to President Trump, former President Trump. Bean Wen says that, hey, he still supports issues like legislation like SB 202, the state's rewrite of election laws that includes new obstacles to voting by mail.
That's right. And we are going to have a lot of coverage on the AJC for those down ballot races all the way through November. Our colleagues Maya Prabhu and Mark Nisi are going to be taking the lead on that. But we're lucky that we have a large newsroom to also bring in our local teams for those state, House, and Senate races, which are so important. And then we'll also have a lot of subject area expertise that's being brought in on those down ballot races as well. And I think we have time for one more question. And Tia, I'll give it to you. This is from Tom Salyers, and he asks, are you seeing backlash among the Johnny Isakson wing of the GOP? He says, rest in peace to that wing of the GOP, related to the fake electors and the overall Stop the Steal effort.
So, and Greg probably has stuff to add for this too, but it's been interesting to cover January 6th, the Stop the Steal efforts, and now the ongoing investigations of those efforts via the January 6th committee, the Fulton County Special Grand Jury. Georgia has been a through line, not just in the Fulton County investigation, but in the House January 6th Select Committee. And it's, as you know, it's mostly Democrats who are speaking out. Most Republicans, I would say, are silent. Now, there are some Republicans on the more conservative Republicans, your Marjorie Taylor Greenes, your Jody Heises, who are vocally criticizing these efforts and in a lot of ways still, undermining or spreading misinformation about the 2020 general election. But I would say those Johnny Isakson Republicans, privately, I think they are, they're not happy with those Stop the Steal efforts. Privately, they think they're not helpful. Not only do they think it's not helpful for democracy, they don't really think it's helpful for their party and its long-term future. But are they saying that publicly? Most of them, no.
Okay, great. Greg, do you have a little bit more to weigh in on from what you're saying? Because I know you've been
the most senior Republican who has spoken out against this is also the only Republican who doesn't have to worry about re-election. It's Lieutenant Governor Jeff Duncan, who is not running for a second term. As Tia mentioned, most Georgia Republicans have been silent on these issues, but also, we're talking about a number of Republican incumbents like Governor Brian Kemp, like Attorney General Chris Carr, like Insurance Commissioner John King, who beat back Trump-backed challengers who said that they would have gone further, that they wouldn't have certified the election, that they would have, basically bought into the conspiracy theories, the unsubstantiated lies that Trump promoted about the election. So that's kind of the Democrats' sort of nightmare scenario in a way too, is that, these are very conservative lawmakers and politicians, but by contrast to David Perdue, Brian Kemp seems a little bit more moderate, right?
Yeah, and it really does feel like in the strangest way possible, Donald Trump has sort of boosted Brian Kemp's statewide chances because he really has let him and Brad Raffensperger really kind of brand themselves as independent actors and not part of Trump world, which has been very successful for both of those two gentlemen in their primaries and seems to be boosting them a little bit in their general election contest. Well, that is going to be, I think, a good point for us to wrap this up. I want to thank everybody for tuning in and joining us during a portion of your lunch hour. I also want to let you know where you can follow our work. You can follow Greg, Tia, and my coverage at theajc.com. If you're print subscribers, keep it going. I love print myself also. You can follow us all on Twitter. Greg is at Bluestein. Tia is at Tia Reports and also at AJC Con Washington. Is that right, Tia? Did I get that right?
Yeah, AJC on Washington. Mm-hmm.
Okay, great. I am at Murphy AJC. Also, Greg and I host the Politically Georgia podcast, and Tia is a frequent guest on our podcast, and that has new episodes every Wednesday and Friday, and you can listen and subscribe on Apple, Stitcher, and wherever you get your podcasts. And other than that, stay with us through November because we are going to have some very exciting days, nights, and early mornings in Georgia politics and also at theajc.com.
Thank you, Patricia, Greg, Tia, and thank you everyone for attending today's subscriber briefing. We host these every few weeks, so please stay tuned and tell your friends about this. I know we shared a lot of information with you today and links and things to follow. We'll include those in the follow-up email, so if you didn't catch everything that was thrown out at you, rest assured you'll see it in your inbox in the next day or so. So thank you very much on behalf of the AJC, and we'll see you next time.